Today's topic is the rest part of the vision that consists of photochemistry of vision, dark and light adaptation, visual acuity, field of vision, extraocular movements, and color vision. Moving on to the topic, before moving on to the topic, let's see the inner layer of the retina. This is an animated image of an extrafoveal region of the retina. Retina consists of 10 layers. It contains the rods and cones, which are the visual receptors, and it has four types of neurons that are the bipolar cells, ganglion cells, horizontal cells, and amacrine cells. So, this is the extrafoveal region of retina. Here you can see the outer pigmented epithelium. This contains the dark pigment called fusing. The photoreceptor outer segments, you can see the rods and cones. These are the photoreceptors, and this is the outer segment of the photoreceptor. This is the inner segment, and this is the synaptic terminal. You can see the outer flexiform layer in which the synaptic terminals of the rods and cones synapses with the dendrites of the bipolar cells. These are the bipolar cells which are present in the inner nuclear layer. And you can see the inner flexiform layer which has the synapses between the uh, axons of the bipolar cells and dendrites of the ganglion cells. And ganglion cells, the axons of the ganglion cell layer exit out as the optic nerve. These we have seen in the previous classes. So now moving on to the photoreceptors, rods and cones. Rods are about 120 million, and they are rods are about 120 million in the eye. We have previously seen about them, and they are sensitive to low intensity light. They are responsible for night vision, and they are not present on the fovea. They doesn't have color vision. Okay, cones are high threshold, sensitive to high intensity light, day vision, high acuity, present on fovea, dark adaptation is early, and color vision is present. So rods and cones in common have three important structure, that is the outer segment, inner segment, and synaptic terminals. In the outer segment you have the membranous disc. These are the discs in which the rhodopsin and iodopsin are present. Okay, these are the photopigments are present. And this is the inner segment which is rich in mitochondria, and the synaptic terminals, it has the bipolar cells, which as bipolar cells has on center and off center, and these release and store the neurotransmitter glutamate. Okay, next we'll see about the bipolar cells. The bipolar cells receive signals from rods and cones and makes connection with the ganglion cell. On activation produces hyperpolarizing and depolarizing potential. Remember, the bipolar cells are responsible for hyperpolarization and depolarization potential changes. The ganglion cell is the only output of retina. It is capable of producing action potential. And horizontal cells, it is an inhibitory interneuron. Horizontal cells are capable of hyperpolarization. And amacrine cells, it is an inhibitory interneuron. It is purely depolarization. Okay, amacrine cell is purely depolarization. And Muller cells are supporting glial cells. They have no role in visual processing. This is an image of a retina that is seen under ophthalmoscope. This is known as fundus. This fundus is nothing but the interior of the posterior wall of the eyeball. Here two important structures we need to know, that is the optic disc and the fovea centralis and macula lutea. The optic disc is also known as blind spot. It is the convergence of the ganglion cells. So here there is no rods and cones. So when it is insensitive to light. And fovea centralis is nothing but it's a minute depression in the posterior of the eyeball. Now moving on to the topic of the phototransduction cascade. Before this, just remember the responses of rods and cones. And horizontal cells are hyperpolarizing, bipolar is hyperpolarizing and depolarizing, amacrine is depolarizing. Okay, so you know that the photosensitive pigments present in rods and cones are concerned with chemical basis of visual process. The chemical reactions involved in these pigments lead to the development of electrical activity in the retina and generation of impulses, which are transmitted to the optic nerve. This photochemical change in the visual receptor cells are called Wald's visual cycle. So the photochemical changes in the rhodopsin, that is the rods, is known as Wald's visual cycle. When retina is examined in dark, the rods appear in red because of rhodopsin. During light exposure, it is bleached and color becomes yellow. So the following changes takes place due to the absorption of light by the rhodopsin. So you can see when the rhodopsin, first the rhodopsin is decomposed into batho-rhodopsin, that is very unstable product, and then into lumi-rhodopsin. This lumi-rhodopsin decays to form meta-rhodopsin 1. This meta-rhodopsin is split into is a meta-rhodopsin is changed to meta-rhodopsin 2. This is split into scotapsin and all trans retinol. Okay, this all trans retinol is converted into all trans retinol, that is vitamin A, by the enzyme dehydrogenase in the presence of NADH. So this is what happens. This meta-rhodopsin is the activated rhodopsin, since it is helpful in the development of receptor potential in the rod cells. The resynthesis of rhodopsin takes place in such a way that the all-trans retinol, with the help of the enzyme isomerase, is converted into Levensis retinol. This Levensis retinol combines with scotapsin and forms the rhodopsin pigment. Okay, this is what. And now moving on to the proper phototransduction cascade. Visual or phototransduction is a process by which the light energy is converted into receptor potentials in visual receptors. So when the light falls on retina, the rhodopsin is excited, leading to the development of receptor potential in the rod cells. You can see this. There exist two states in rods, that is, there exist two states in rods, that is, this is the dark state and this is the light state. Dark state means it is the absence of light, and light is presence of light. Okay, during the dark state, imagine this as a rod and this is a membranous disc. This is a membranous disc and you have the rhodopsin pigment, and this is transducing, that is a protein. So during the dark state, the rhodopsin is inactive, and the transducin G is that is a G protein, that is also not activated. So the cyclic GMP levels are high, and this helps in opening of the sodium channels, and the sodium are inside, and there's a state of depolarization. So in the state of depolarization, the neurotransmitters are not released. Okay, so there is no excitation taking place. And in the light state, what happens? This active, the light splits the opsin pigment. So see here, in the light state, you can see the retinol is activated and the opsin is bleached, and this inactivates the transducin. So there will be decreased cyclic GMP and closure of the sodium channels, and that's the membrane hyperpolarization takes place. So the neurotransmitter is released and it sends impulses to the cerebral cortex via the optic nerve. So this is the signal transduction cascade. So initially what happens? The light isomerizes the retinol, which activates the rhodopsin. Then active rhodopsin in turn activates the transducin. This transducin binds with the phosphodiesterase and detaches from the cyclic GMP and causes the closure of the sodium channels. The sudden closure of the sodium channel prevents the entry of sodium ions, leading to hyperpolarization. The potential now reaches to -70, -80. Thus, the process of receptor potential in visual receptors is unique in nature. When other sensory receptors are excited, the electrical response is in the form of depolarization, but in visual receptor, the response is in the form of hyperpolarization. Actually, after hyperpolarization, what happens is there is some release of synaptic transmitter glutamate. actually reduces the release of synaptic transmitter glutamate that leads to excitation of the bipolar cells and ganglion cells, which in turn sends action potentials to the cerebral cortex via the optic pathway. Resynthesis of cyclic GMP takes place. That is, when more light is focused on the pigments, this reduces the concentration of calcium and sodium. This decrease in calcium activates the guanyl cyclase. This activated guanyl cyclase increases cyclic GMP, and it also inhibits the light activator phosphodiesterase. This is what phototransduction cascade pathway. This is very important and you need to know it. If you are not able to follow the video, you can go through the slides. Next, moving on to the another topic, that is dark adaptation and light adaptation. You all might have experienced that if you are seeing a bright light for some times, and if you are suddenly turning to the other side, you may see some blackening. That is what actually dark adaptation is. Dark adaptation is the process by which the person is able to see the object in dim light. So if a person enters a dim lighted room from a bright lighted area, he is blind for some time. That is, he cannot see any object. After some time, he gets adapted and he starts seeing the object slowly. Okay. The causes for dark adaptation may be due to increased sensitivity of rods as a result of resynthesis of rhodopsin. Actually, what happens when a bright light is shown to the right, the rhodopsin pigment bleaches, and after sometimes it regenerates. The amount taken for the regeneration of the rhodopsin is the period where you are unable to see any object. Then dilatation of the pupil. The dilatation of the pupil during dark adaptation allows more and more light to enter the eye. So, red goggles can eliminate this dark adaptation. Next, moving on to the dark adaptation curve. It is a curve that demonstrates the relationship between the threshold intensity and the time in the dark. This is obtained by an experiment where the subject looks at a bright light for some time, and this bright light is switched off and is asked to look at a dark background. He will not be able to see any object, and now after some times a dim light is brought, and the time interval between the switching of bright light and detection of dim light is noted. After some time, the absolute threshold is measured again and elapsed time is noted. This procedure is repeated for about 30 minutes. The curve obtained is a biphasic curve. The first part of the curve is due to cone adaptation and the second part is due to rod adaptation. So the first phase is rapid and is completed in 8 to 10 minutes. During this phase, the threshold is decreased. That is, the sensitivity of eye in the dark room increases by 1000 times. There is a rod cone break. After the first phase, there is a sudden change in the slope of the curve, and this point of the curve is called rod cone break. This rod cone break represents where rod sensitivity begins to exceed cone sensitivity, and remaining part of the curve is determined by the continuing adaptation of the rods. So the rod adaptation is the second phase of the curve and it is very slow. This phase is gradual decrease in the threshold and it is completed by 20 to 30 minutes. In this, the sensitivity of eye in dark room is increases by lakhs. Okay. Now, light adaptation. Light adaptation is the process in which eyes get adapted to increased illumination. When a person enters a bright lighted area from a dim lighted area, he feels discomfort due to dazzling effect of bright light. After some times, when the eyes become adapted to light, he sees the object around him without any discomfort. So, light adaptation is mere disappearance of dark adaptation. Maximum duration is about 5 minutes. The causes may be due to reduced sensitivity of rods and constriction of pupil. The applied physiology in this is night blindness. Night blindness is defined as a loss of vision when light in the environment becomes dim. Okay, the main cause of night blindness is deficiency of vitamin A. Now moving on to another important topic, that is the visual acuity. So visual acuity is defined as the degree to which the detail and counters of objects are perceived, and it is usually defined in terms of shortest distance by which two lines can be separated and still perceived as two lines. Cones are responsible for visual acuity, highly exhibited in fovea centralis. Okay. So, in simple terms, visual acuity is defined as the spatial resolving capacity of visual system or its ability to discriminate between two points. So, this can be explained in the foveal region. The diameter of the cone is about 1.5 microns, and the distance between each cone is about 0.5 microns. So when two objects, if two objects are close, the two adjacent cones are stimulated. Two objects are close and the two adjacent cones are stimulated. The subject would appreciate it as one. So there must be at least one unstimulated object between the two unstimulated cone between the two stimulated cone for the resolution that these are two targets. Okay, this is what explained. If two objects are close that two adjacent cones are stimulated, the object would appreciate them as single target. Therefore, there must be an unstimulated cone in between stimulated ones to allow for resolution of two targets or edges. So the principle of Snellen acuity is the line. You might have seen the prescriptions written as 6 by 18, 6 by 60 or 6 by 9 like this. So this is 6 by 6 is normal vision, and the number above the line describes the distance of the patient from the chart, and number below denotes which line is seen. Each letter is designed in a square with the sides 5 times the width of letter stroke. The breadth of black stroke and white stroke spaces are equal. So see, this is black, white, black, white, black. So each angle it subtends 5 minutes. So if a person is standing at a 6-meter distance from the letter, this subtends an angle of 5 minutes of arc. The minimum minimum angle of resolution is 1 minute of arc. So the breadth of the line and space produce 1 minute of arc at nodal point when viewed from certain distance. Each letter subtends an 5 minute of arc at nodal point when seen at a certain distance. So on line 6 by 6, each letter is constructed to subtend an angle of 1 minute of arc at a distance of 6 meter. So other lines are constructed in a similar way so that the letters on 6 by 18 line or 6 by 60 line subtend an angle of 1 minute of arc if tested at 18 meter or 16 meter respectively from the chart. This is the Snellen chart which is used for testing the far vision, and this is the Jacobs chart which is used for testing the near vision. Okay, next moving on to the important topic, color vision. So human eye can recognize up to 150 different colors in the invisible spectrum, and discriminate and appreciation depends upon the ability of the receptors in the retina. The visible spectrum is about 700 nanometer. It is 350 to 700 nanometer. You have primary colors, that is red, green and blue, when combined together produce white. Complementary colors are when pair of two colors are mixed, they produce white color. The color sensitive areas in the retina are the peripheral part, which is devoid of cones. It is sensitive to white, black and gray only. The central portion of retina, that is fovea centralis, has more cones, so it is more sensitive to color. In the extrafoveal regions, the cones are mingled with the rods. The retinal area sensitive to blue is largest and to green the smallest. Okay. There are theories that explains the mechanism of color vision, that is retinal mechanism and neural mechanism. So theories of color vision are Thomas Young's trichromatic theory, Helmholtz trichromatic theory, Grain's modulator and dominator theory, Hartrich's polychromatic theory, Herring's theory of opposite colors. So according to Thomas Young, retina has 3 types of cones. Each possesses its own photosensitive substance. Each cone gives response to one of the primary color, that is red, green and blue. The different color sensations are produced by the stimulation of various combination of the 3 types of cones. Okay. Green's modulator theory observed that ganglionic cells of retina are stimulated by the whole of the visual spectrum. He studied the action potentials in ganglionic cells stimulated by light and obtained some sensitivity curves by using the different wavelengths of light, both in light adapted and dark adapted eyes. On the basis of the sensitivity curves, he classified the ganglionic cells into two groups, namely the dominators and modulators. So, need not know about more about the theories of color vision. Just know that it has two mechanisms, that is retinal mechanism and neural mechanism. In retinal mechanism, what it says that the retina has three types of cones, that is the three primary colors, red, green and blue. In neural mechanism, the ganglion cells are involved in the processing of color vision. That is what it is saying. And the contrast effects, it has two types, simultaneous contrast and successive contrast. Simultaneous contrast is the effect that intensifies the contrast between two colors which are placed against each other. So when black is placed against white or white against black, these two colors set one another off. So the black looks blacker and the white looks whiter. Then successive contrast is the effect of previously viewed color field on the appearance of currently viewed color field. When a person looks at a green object and after green object, after looking at a bright red, the green object appears to be more greenish. Okay, this is the reason behind this successive contrast is that stimulation of an area of retina modifies its sensitivity to the successive stimuli. Thus, there is an increase in the sensitivity to the second color. The color vision can be tested by Ishihara's color charts, colored pool, Eldridge green lantern. The applied physiology of color blindness is color vision is color blindness. It is failure to appreciate one or more color, common in 8% males and 0.4% females. The inheritance pattern is X-linked recessive pattern. The color blindness can be of three types, that is monochromatism, dichromatism, trichromatism. So monochromatism is a condition in which the total inability to perceive color. So rod monochromatism is nothing but in this the vision purely depends on the rods. The rods are responsible for vision in the dim light. They doesn't have color vision property. So and cone monochromatism, in this the vision purely depends upon the cone properties. This states that in rod monochromatism, the cones are functionless, and in cone monochromatism, the rods are functionless. So dichromatism is that in which in this color blindness, the subject can appreciate only two colors out of the three primary colors. Okay, in protanopia, there is defect in the receptor of the first primary color, that is red. So the subject cannot appreciate red color. Deuteranopia, in this the receptor for the green color is defective, so the subject cannot appreciate blue. Deuteranopia is green and the subject cannot appreciate green. In tritonopia it is blue, the subject cannot appreciate blue. In trichromatism, this is the subject may be able to perceive all the three colors, but one color is he may not be able to perceive it correctly. So in protoanomia anomaly, the red perception is weak. In deuteroanomaly, the green perception is weak, and tritoanomaly, the blue perception is weak. Next, moving on to the field of vision. This field of vision is nothing but it is a part of the external world seen by one eye when it is fixed in one direction. Okay, it has two types, binocular vision and monocular vision. Binocular vision is vision in which both the eyes are used together so that a portion of external world is seen by eyes together. Monocular vision, it is a vision in which eye is used separately. Okay, because of this, different portion of the external world is seen by different vision. different eye, seen by each eye. So divisions of the visual fields, you have four divisions, that is temporal field, nasal field, upper field and lower field. So the visual field of a human eye has an angle of 160 degree in the horizontal meridian and 135 degree in the vertical meridian. So the temporal and nasal fields are divided into two. So imagine these two eyes. This is the nasal field and this is the temporal field. Okay. The visual field of each eye is divided into two unequal parts, namely outer, or this is the outer or temporal field, and this is the inner or nasal field by the vertical meridian passing to the fixation point. Okay, the temporal part of visual field extends up to 100 degree, but the nasal part is limited, that is extends up to 60 degree as it is limited by the nose. And for the lower part, the visual field of each eye is also divided into, this is the upper field, this is the lower field by the horizontal line passing to the fixation point. The extent of the upper field is about 60 degree as it is restricted by the upper eyelid and the orbital margin. The temporal field, nasal field, upper field and lower field. The corresponding retinal point is the area in the retina of both eyes on which light rays from the object falls. It occurs in binocular vision. If light rays do not fall on the corresponding retinal point, diplopia occurs. Diplopia means double vision. The mapping of the visual field is nothing but the peripheral portion of the eye are mapped with an instrument called perimeter, and the process is referred to as perimetry. This is how you will assess for the visual field. Now coming to the last topic, that is extraocular muscles. Extraocular muscles are of two types, that is intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles. The intrinsic muscles are the constrictor pupillae, dilator pupillae and ciliary muscles. The extrinsic muscles are superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial or internal rectus, lateral or external rectus, superior oblique and inferior oblique. So the innervation of the extensor muscles are by the oculomotor, trochlear nerve and abducens nerve. All the muscles are innervated by the oculomotor nerve except superior oblique and lateral rectus. This SO4, LR6, you can remember it as a mnemonic. SO4 is superior oblique, which is innervated by the trochlear nerve, that is the fourth cranial nerve, and LR6 is the lateral rectus, which is innervated by the sixth cranial nerve, that is the abducens nerve. So in this image you can see the muscles, extrinsic muscles, superior oblique and superior rectus, lateral rectus, inferior oblique, inferior rectus. So the ocular movements, the eyeball moves or rotates within the orbital socket in all the three primary axes, that is the vertical, transverse and anteroposterior. So vertical axis you have the adduction, lateral and abduction. In transverse part you have the elevation and depression, and in anteroposterior you have the intorsion and extorsion. Okay, and with this you have some simultaneous movements of both eyes, that is conjugate and conjugate movement, disconjugate movement, pursuit movement, saccadic movement. Conjugate movement um, is a movement of both eyeballs in the same direction. Okay, uh, the visual axis remains parallel. Disconjugate movement is the movement of the both eyeballs in the opposite direction. Okay, pursuit movement is movement of eyeball along with the object when eyeballs are fixed on a moving object. Saccadic movement is the sudden jerky movement of the eyeball. So this is the movement and the primary muscle involved and the secondary muscle. Abduction, the primary muscle is lateral rectus, adduction medial rectus, elevation by superior, depression by inferior rectus, extorsion by inferior oblique and intorsion by superior oblique. These are the movements of the eye. And that's all for today's. Thank you.